Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off.
Blast off on another episode of Hero Paranormal, broadcasting from the base at La Madre Mountain, just south of Area 51. My name is Ryan, the original outlaw of the airwaves, bringing you a ridiculously epic episode tonight. Oh man, if you're into conspiracy, we have it tonight for you. Everything you could imagine. Isaac Weishaupt. I will be discussing his new book that made quite the impression on the UFO community, Aliens, UFOs, and the Occult, Use Your Illusion 1. And this book is, it made an impression for a good reason. It made a bestsellers list on Amazon. I believe it's number 1 and in its category. And if you don't know who Isaac is, he hosts the Conspiracy Theories and Unpopular Culture podcast. He's been a featured guest on Dave Navarro's Dark Matter Radio, Tinfoil Hat Podcast, Blackout Radio, Richard C. Hoagland's Other Side of Midnight, and the list goes on and on. And he knows that aliens and UFOs are part of the hidden agenda. I met Isaac back in 2012 at a convention, if I'm not mistaken, in Salt Lake City, Utah. We kind of touched on some topics that we were both interested in, and I'll just be honest, he's the real deal, as cool a cat as they come. His research is, bar none, ridiculous. He goes into extreme depth and doesn't come forth with a theory until he's pretty darn sure that he's not on thin ice. And that's what I like about Isaac. He's to the point, he's ridiculously smart, and his books have so much information, man. It just puts me to shame. Being an author myself, the quality and caliber of his footnotes, his books, and how they tie one into the other. I'm very impressed that Use Your Illusion 1. I'm hoping that there's a Use Your Illusion 2. I will ask him about that. And anyway, the painstaking attention to detail. Being an author, I can say that this guy is the real deal, goes above and beyond what most do, and backs it up. Not only does he back it up, but his books back each other up, which is super cool. And I'm a Patreon supporter of Isaac's, and I recommend that you become one too. So yeah, let's get this show on the road. I'm super excited, as usual, to talk to Isaac. We'll give him a call here and see what's going on. Isaac, welcome to the Hero Paranormal Podcast.
What's going on, Ryan?
Hey, how's it going, my man? How you been?
Good. How you been, man?
Can't complain. Just enjoying this slow burn apocalypse, I guess. It's a thing.
Yeah, that's all you can do, really. I mean, why? What's the? I think the quote might come from Point Break, but it was something about either learn to surf or fight the waves.
Perfect quote, man. So so we're recording here, and I wanted to first of all say congratulations, Isaac, on your new book, Aliens, UFOs, and the Occult, Use Your Illusion 1. I'm hoping there's a 2 because I'm already hooked, dude. This is, being an author myself, I kind of said a little bit of this in the intro, but the extent that you go to do the research and the way that you pile it up and create this kind of roadmap explaining how these things are connected is pretty mind-boggling.
Wow, thank you. That's quite the compliment coming from a guy like you. I know you're no newbie to this realm of extraterrestrial investigation, so that holds a lot of weight with me. Thank you.
It's a killer book, man. It deserves the accolades it's got, and it goes into how aliens and UFOs are part of a hidden agenda, and kind of the occult method to bring about a new age of mankind. And it hit the #1 spot on Amazon, and ufologists are finally eating up your impressive knowledge. How is that going? Are you getting reached out to by probably people you didn't before?
Well, you know, I didn't even think about that until you said that. Interestingly enough, I've had a couple people that weren't typically in my circle contacting me. No huge names yet. I actually reached out to the big names like Coast to Coast, and I haven't got a response yet. Maybe it was a little premature, but I'm actually like, I'm not how do I say this without sounding either too modest or too narcissistic? I'm half surprised by the great reviews that it's getting and the feedback that I've gotten, because what happened? Let me try to explain myself here. What happened? I've been trying to write this book for a couple years, and I just never had the momentum, the inertia going to, like, you know how it is writing. It's like you'll go through these long periods of not necessarily writer's block, but it's just so far on the back burner, and I don't have the time to be like, okay, let me really sit here and focus and crank out some work on this book. And with 2020 and the events that we were all familiar with, it seemed that something was afoot, right? And I thought, if I'm going to write this book, I got to do it now. And originally, I wanted to drop both Use Your Illusion 1 and Use Your Illusion 2 at the same time, you know, as a bit of an homage to Guns N' Roses, as a bit of a reference to the ideas I'm presenting in the book, which I'm sure we'll get into today. But what happened was that I saw things heating up so quickly that I thought, I'm just going to push the first book out, and I'll work on the second one and push that out in 2021. And I feel like it was a good move. It was a good call, because there's been, as I sort of, and I'm not like some Nostradamus, but as the writing on the wall was showing me, is that they were going to heat this agenda up to do disclosure on the masses. And we see evidence of that with just various ideas and themes that are being floated by the mainstream media. And of course, we'll get into that. But Use Your Illusion 2 is going to be basically sort of just a book of film analyses where I go through different films and sort of support the ideas I'm presenting in the first book of this idea of, like, well, they planted the symbolism and the themes into all these films, and here's where the ideas, you know, sort of revealed themselves years and years ago, and they've been sort of going down this path to slowly indoctrinate and persuade the masses through entertainment, which is kind of my shtick, sort of. So, yeah, that was kind of the background on the books, and the reviews, man, I'm blown away. I really appreciate it, because I was worried that a lot of people would think maybe I was reaching too far with some of my ideas, because this isn't I'd like to think it's not a typical alien UFO book, but yeah, I'm actually surprised at how many people really enjoyed it. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'd say it's far from typical, and you always kind of push the limits, but you have been in this game for years, and when it comes to the occult, and I love the titles of so many of your chapters, like The Occult Paths to Alien Gods. I mean, you tie in so seamlessly that it's hard not to just appreciate it. And I'm glad that you pushed the first book out, and I'm glad that you are kind of a Nostradamus, because I want to get to the Klaus Schwab and that whole Great Reset and the writing on the wall there. But back to your book and how it just gets to the point. I mean, damn, it really does.
That was my goal. Yes, because I'm, and like that's the approach I take with the show too, with the podcast, where I try not to be too flowery. I myself am a consumer of content all day, every day. I'm reading books, watching movies, and so on. And when I always joke about it, if it's over 90 minutes, like, you should have cut more out as far as the film goes. And I like my books shorter too, like some of these books I've had to comb through. It's like 500 pages. And I'm like, dude, you could have cut half of this out. Like I don't need all this. And that was kind of the approach. So I appreciate that you were able to sort of see that too. I try to keep it at 200, 250 pages, somewhere in that ballpark, and just get the information out without too much flowery hypothesizing or a lot of these UFO books that I had to read through was like half of it was like spooky campfire stories, and it's like, all right, aren't we ready to move past the spooky campfire stories and just talk about what this could be? Because as I assume that maybe you're in, and maybe you can tell me what your thoughts on this, but like I myself am past the point of saying, is this a real phenomenon or not? And I'm to the point of saying there's elements of truth to this that are unexplainable. What could it possibly be? That's kind of where I'm at on it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good place to be. That's a good place to be on it. And you do, I mean, the way that this is written, this book, not to fluff too much and, blow too much smoke up your butt, but man, you like seriously the aliens, UFOs, and the occult, Use Your Illusion 1, in the chapter Occult Paths to Alien Gods. I'm going to read a quick passage just to tantalize our listeners. This discussion on symbolism and making contact with other dimensions or entities through the subconscious is an idea that seems crucial to our understanding of the alien and UFO movement. If we consider the argument that occult forces are seeking to create a new reality devoid of religion by manifesting entities through symbolism and contact via the subconscious, then we may be able to define one tactic in accomplishing the great work.
Yeah, that's what and by the way, like I'll take all the smoke blown at me. I can. Thank you. To me, like this is, and you hinted about Klaus Schwab, and we'll talk about that, I guess. But like to me, doing this research, and I've been blogging and YouTubing and podcasting for 10 years now, and my focus has always been learning about the occult, learning about symbolism. And it's all very fascinating stuff, but to me, I see the elements tying together with entertainment, and I think the alien UFO agenda is no different in that the same sort of patterns that I see in entertainment with the occult symbolism appear when you look at the alien agenda over history, and how we got to the point we are today through all of these occultists of the past and their attempts to make contact with the divine or the gods or whatever we want to call this thing. They do it through a prescribed sort of method, I would argue, of occult techniques going through the creative side of the mind, subconscious, sort of woo-woo, weird, wacky ideas that, like, I don't profess to understand how this works exactly. I'm reading what these guys are writing and saying and doing, and just sort of reporting it and saying, look, this is kind of what I see and how I see it. And it's funny because since I wrote the first book here, I recently, as you know, I recently was reading Klaus Schwab's books, COVID-19, The Great Reset, and the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Because so many truthers, they have been talking about the Great Reset and the new normal, and I thought, and I'm not the guy who, like, I'm sort of redefining myself. Like, I don't really want to define myself as a truther so much, because I more or less report on what truthers are saying and doing and give my spin on it, because I don't always agree with all the truthers. And with the Great Reset, there was a lot of fear-mongering about, like, they're using this virus to create the New World Order, basically, and I'm like, okay, I mean, maybe, right? But let me read this guy's books and see if that's really what they're saying. And to my surprise, that's kind of what they're saying. And in hindsight, I'm thinking about the concepts of this first Alien book and this idea of mass disclosure, and I think, man, this could very well tie into the Great Reset, because they're changing our environment. Like when you get into the idea of making contact with the gods or the divine or the aliens, there's a bit of hallucinogenic experience almost when and there's a section in the book on drugs and making contact with the divine through drugs. And it's like psilocybin or DMT or something where they say, oh, you do this and it opens up gateways. It opens up one's understanding of the world and unlocks, higher dimensions. And I've never done them, and I'm not opposed to doing them. I just haven't done them. And so I can't speak from experience, but listening to others, like you read Michael Pollan's book on this subject of hallucinogens, and he talks about how it's all about the set and setting. What's your intention before taking this trip? And I would argue that maybe the alien agenda fits into the Great Reset under the idea that whether or not it's justified, we are in fact going through a ritual on a massive scale, on a global scale. We're going through a ritual with this virus. You've got all the elements there of an occult ritual. You've got facing and confronting death, which is always like, 101 in Freemasonic or skull and bones type stuff. That's what all that symbolism of the skull represents, is facing one's death, facing one's own mortality, and trying to overcome that. Then, so obviously the whole world is like, oh my God, am I going to die from this thing? Then you've got the face masks, right? And like I said, put the idea of does this work or doesn't work, scientific studies, not agendas, put that aside and just look at the facts of the matter. And we see, everyone's being told to wear masks. And masks are, again, part of an occult ritual where it's meant to suppress the ego, right? And we see this in the Freemasonic traditions where they wear a hoodwink over their eyes. So it's a little different, right? I mean, we're talking about a mask over the face. Mm-hmm. In fact, some people say, well, Fauci said we're supposed to wear goggles over our eyes too. And like, okay, yeah, that's true. It just adds more fuel to that idea that they're suppressing the ego. They're making us confront death and fear. They're also creating a new environment, and that's part of the set and setting and the idea of, like, because Michael Pollan says when you do these hallucinogens to have the right effect, you've got to be in the right frame of mind. You got to be in the right location. You got to, that's why you see a lot of these folks going to these sort of like shamanic villages in Costa Rica or wherever they're at, and they're doing this stuff because you got to have the right setting and intentions beforehand. So I would argue that the Great Reset and the events of 2020 have fundamentally changed everyone's environment. So like all these elements do fit into the idea of, and then add in all the mantras of, from day one they said, okay, we're never going back. It's a new normal. It's the Great Reset. And I remember back at the beginning of this saying, why does anything have to change? What are you talking about? And like I said, I'm not the best truther on earth. Like, I'm kind of saying, yeah, viruses exist. Okay, this happens. We've had pandemics before. So, like, I'm on board with, like, maybe this is real. And then, I see hospitals that are overflowing, and I talk to people in the medical field that do this for a living, and I'm kind of on board with, like, okay, this is a real thing, and this is something we got to deal with. And, of course, to what extent is arguable. How far should we be invested into this thing of being scared? But the point is that the new normal and the Great Reset mantras have been placed upon us, and they are in fact changing the environment for the new normal, which I would argue could very well fit into this alien, this theory I'm laying out, that they are paving the foundation for the new understanding of reality. Scarily enough, I would argue that furthermore, it's the globalization stuff. It's also the New World Order stuff. It's also part of, ultimately supporting a transhuman religion, a religion of Luciferianism, perhaps, and all these sort of ideas that, you go from the facts to a little more down the line of, these are just my philosophies and ideas of what this could turn into based upon the teachings of the occultists from the past who have laid the foundations for our understanding of reality and extraterrestrials today. So yeah, long answer short, I think that the architects of this globalist Great Reset thing might very well be tied into this alien agenda.
Yeah, it has sort of a grand architect type. To what extent is crazy, because it just seems so far-fetched, that all this information is suppressed yet blatantly exposed through Hollywood. And I'm glad that you mentioned the disclosure through Hollywood. And it's not just science fiction, is it? I mean, it's everywhere, right, Isaac?
Yeah, that's right. It's when you look at and you have to look at, for some of the audience that maybe they're not familiar with some of the more sort of basics of the idea that propaganda exists. You look at the ABC organizations in our own country, in the CIA, for example, and they have these Operation Mockingbird, where they've infiltrated the Hollywood to sort of sell the masses on the idea that communism is the real enemy here and be scared of it at all costs, which, again, that could take us into a different argument that I've been trying to further research and understand, because, like, as a truther community here, we kind of say, okay, yeah, the CIA was bad. These organizations are bad because they've lied to us and they've deceived us through propaganda. But that propaganda says communism is the worst thing ever. So that makes me wonder, well, if they're the bad guy and they're the enemy and they're saying communism is bad, does that mean communism is good? And I don't agree with that. I do think that the globalist communist sort of concept is not a good one. I'm more of a I like the freedoms that we get here in America, although, albeit some of these ideas are flawed. Sometimes capitalism left unchecked can go too far. Mm-hmm. Like I said, that's a longer argument for another show. But yeah, so we're talking about Hollywood. So you got this like Project Mockingbird. CIA is manipulating us through that kind of stuff. Then you've got in the book we talk about the Robertson panel, and this is like in 1953, where basically there was this study and this coordinated agenda to persuade the masses that, like, hey, this unexplained phenomenon, we're looking into it, and everything's fine. And it turns out this is all swamp gas, as they say, from it was J. Allen Hynek sort of debunked one of these things with swamp gas. But now it seems that I would argue they've had another sort of Robertson panel that we don't know about yet, and that probably happened, if I was to guess, maybe 90s, 2000s, somewhere in there, where they've decided that, well, let's flip this around. Now let's make them believe in UFOs. Because the masses are easily swayed, right? They kind of just digest whatever's fed to them. But you've got these organizations like Disney, who were part of the Robertson panel propaganda, from the 50s onward, who, they were part of showing us an idea and theme within these movies. And they were part of that, but now they're part of the reverse. They're part of the UAP disclosure, which is propaganda, right? They change the terms. That's one of the essential elements of propaganda. You change the term from UFO to UAP, because UFO's got a stigma because of what they from 50 years of propaganda telling people, like, oh, this is what the silly, tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy losers are they believe in UFOs, and aren't they weird and wacky? But now they got to flip that around, mm-hmm. which by the way, the tinfoil hat, that was a term invented by Julian Huxley, Aldous Huxley's older brother, I think it was, or cousin. Mm-hmm. And he wrote about this science fiction story about brain waves, or about what was it? It was some kind of like radio waves infecting people's brains, so people would wear tinfoil hats to block the frequencies. And that's where the idea of a tinfoil hat came into existence. But they actually found in studies that wearing tinfoil on your hat actually amplifies signals. So, like, You talk about disinformation and propaganda, like, was Huxley using propaganda suggesting you should wear tinfoil hat to block frequencies when in reality it actually amplifies it, you know? So you got all these, like, spy, counter-spy ideas in the UFO community. And it's argued that Disney, who was part of this previous propaganda swing, they're now on the other side of it. And they own, you know, say like 90% of media is owned by just 6 companies. So every piece of media, news, film, TV, everything comes from basically 6 voices, 6 handlers. And Disney, they own History Channel and A&E and all that stuff. And that's where you get all these shows that I enjoy, yet at the same time I'm very critical of, like Ancient Aliens. And what else they got? They have a bunch. They got the Skinwalker Ranch stuff, which is your sort of expertise there. You got the Skinwalker Ranch shows, and all this stuff they're basically presenting us with the fact that, they're basically
no worries.
They're basically bombarding us with the questioning reality, questioning our previous ideas of what UFOs and aliens are and were, and suggesting to us that they're real. And I'd argue they're doing this through Disney, through TV, through entertainment, because there's a lot of distrust for the government, the official, the mainstream sources, I should say, as is evidenced by 2020. I mean, look at how many people don't trust, I don't want to use the terms, but the stabbies. They don't trust a lot of the official narratives about what's actually happening in our world. So it's a very sort of sly idea, but they've been doing this since the 40s and 50s, CIA Operation Mockingbird.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is these guys have been at it a while, and I'm so glad that your book goes into topics like manifesting aliens and magic and the concept of making mental connections to extraterrestrials, stuff that is so off. Most people won't touch that with a 10-foot pole. How, and you just go into it and just chop it up, man. It's killer.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, that's a fascinating element to me, learning about ritual magic and what these occultists do. And to me, I just think there's such a clear connection between what people like, Aleister Crowley and Carl Jung and Marina Abramovich and all these figures that when you hang out long enough in these conspiracy circles, you hear all these names. But when you look at all the things that they've been saying and doing, I mean, Aleister Crowley himself, of course, infamously used the ritual of magic to summon the first gray alien lamb. But all these things connect to the world of Hollywood and these artists and these celebrities. It was Crowley who said that he said that art was the key to transmutation of inner psychic visions. And what's he saying there? Well, he's basically saying that the subconscious, the ideas, the thoughts that one thinks can be projected out into the universe and therefore create a reality, which sounds like super bizarro, but that's what ritual magic is all about. And that's what Carl Jung was talking about with this collective unconscious, with archetypes, like we're all sort of channeling these thoughts together. We have this collective unconscious that we're all connected, and we all kind of know it, we just can't put our finger on it. And that's what I think the TV shows and the movies, they kind of poke at this thing that we all kind of think, maybe there's life beyond this existence that we can sense with our 5 senses. And I don't disagree with any of that. Like I do believe there's other dimensions of existence. So like on some levels, I agree that this is possible, that these entities exist in another dimension. But to me, I think when you look at the occult arts, it's all about trying to channel and bring these entities into our world. You give them enough energy that they can be pulled in, much like, very basically, you see on the ghost hunting shows. They use the energy of the ghost hunter and they sort of pull themselves into existence, albeit for maybe an EVP or an apparition or an orb or something like that. I think there's a lot to this idea. I obviously don't profess to understand how it works. I don't know if the powers that be know how it works, but I think that they're exploring this idea through mass disclosure and changing the perceptions of millions and billions of human beings, so that you've got millions of thoughts being energized towards this same common end goal. And as I argue, thoughts become beliefs, become reality, and that's ultimately what they want, is to manifest this into reality.
Absolutely. I think that there's so much good stuff in your book about that, and I'm glad that you went into the drugs and ritual magic practices that have been used to alter the mind in preparation for contact with the divine, as you put it. And through occult practice of ritual magic, manifesting aliens into our world, it's one of these things that Hollywood's hard at work, as well as ritual magicians, and it may be that some of these lines are blurred, and it goes one into the other, and kind of not to lead into the whole drug thing, but I cannot let you get off without talking about the adrenochrome death cult.
Yeah, I have. I almost didn't put that in this book because,
right,
as you know, our whole community is they've censored the crap out of us, and they really are doing a good job of making this conspiracy community seem very subversive. And I get it, right? Like, on one hand, I get it, where these ideas are very controversial, and some people can take this stuff too far. You see this kind of thing. I mean, the example, Adolf Hitler, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a guy who believed in conspiracy theory, but the elders of the protocols of Zion, and look how far he took it. So, like, to kid ourselves and say, well, these are totally safe ideas, like, they're just not. Like, this is a subversive community, and that's what draws me into it. I love it. I love this kind of, like, real extreme sort of dangerous thinking. Mm-hmm. So, like, on one hand, they're not wrong in the sense that they need to be careful with this sort of level of free speech, but on the other hand, I'm like a free speech guy. Like, I'm like, whatever, dude. Even people I disagree with, I'm like, who cares? Let them. Joe Rogan said it. The great Joe Rogan. He said it best. He said, and I'm going to paraphrase from him, but he said the only way to combat bad speech is with better speech. So, if you got people saying that there's I don't know how much you want me to say on your show. I'll try to keep it somewhat so you don't get dinged too hard from the powers that be. But if you got people saying that there's adrenochrome in a certain political parties drinking baby blood, like, I don't know, let them say that, and let's try to dissuade people from believing that if that be the case, right? So all that to say that I almost didn't put this in the book because I'm aware that there's a massive censorship agenda at play. I myself am a victim of this 4 years running so far. But the idea that and boy, oh boy, how do I sum this up? The idea here is that there's some people that believe that the blood of a person, a child specifically, or the fear emitted from a child, this could be harvested and used. That's the idea, and it sounds preposterous. But if you look at Secret Machines, which is a book, actually a series of books, written by Tom DeLonge and Peter Levenda, who are behind a lot of this disclosure movement through To the Stars Academy, run by Tom DeLonge. And I go through this in the book. We won't belabor the point too hard, but Tom DeLonge has a very strange and questionable history and story about how he was brought in to be the voice of disclosure. So that I don't believe. I just don't believe it. It sounds crazy to me. And you got a guy like Peter Levenda, who is allegedly an actual occultist, and whether or not that's true, again, no clue. But to me, I've read several of his books, and the man's extremely intelligent. He's extremely well-versed in these ideas. He knows what he's talking about. Like, I've been trying to get a hold of Peter Levenda to come do my show for years. I hit him up every so often, but no response. Because I think this guy knows. He knows the whole deal.
Mm-hmm.
And in the book, Secret Machines Gods, the first book, because they're rolling out disclosure in their own method through the books, see? And you've seen, I mean, even Kobe Bryant was attempting this through his multimedia organization he was running called Granity, which means magic, by the way. But anyway,
yeah.
And I did a whole series of shows on Kobe when he died back in January.
Which was killer.
But the multimedia approach, that's what To the Stars Academy is all about. And part of that is these books, which, oh, by the way, they've also got fictional books relaying the same message. And, oh, by the way, they've got fictional movies coming out to relay the message. Again, the idea that propaganda consumed as entertainment, a la Francis Bacon, right? He was the guy who invented that technique.
Amen.
But in this book, Secret Machines Gods, the first book, they go through painstakingly, I don't know, it must, 30 pages, 40 pages? It's a good chunk near the beginning of the book. They go through great effort to explain to the reader about this theory of blood sacrifice to the gods. And I don't know that, I put it pretty bluntly, and I don't know that the masses would pick up on this if they were just reading their book, because, like, it reads like, oh, this is just a history lesson, right? And what they're talking about, they're like, oh, the Aztecs, they revered the blood of children because it was considered, the untainted, unripe blood. That's why they used jade as the symbol for it. It was green. The jade is a green gem, and that symbolized the blood of the unripe. And because they thought, as human beings get older, the body is sort of deteriorating, and the original essence, the original divine energy, the spark of God, the soul, whatever, it sort of gets messier and dirtier as time goes by. Because the Aztecs, they thought that we came from the stars, and our blood is infused with the divine essence of God. So the blood holds a measure of consciousness to it, which is why they were selective on the human sacrifices they would perform. The better the blood, the better the sacrifice. If you had high levels of intelligence, royalty, you were great at sports, whatever, then you were considered a higher value sacrifice to the gods. And the same goes for children, right? They were up there with all these other high-profile folks. And they would do the sacrifice, and they talk about all this in the book, right? They say, well, the best way to do this is through a violent sacrifice. They would remove the limbs, they would rip the heart out, they would sever the head. It was all supposed to be very violent because they were trying to unleash this energy from within the body, this divine, measure of consciousness, so it could make it all the way back up to the gods, so the gods would have favor upon the civilization. Well, they also, in that book, go through this whole connection to Gnosticism and the idea that this is a prison planet and that the body is actually just matter trapping our souls within it, the sort of unlimited potential we have inside of us, which you hear a lot of David Icke's lectures. He talks about this kind of idea. And that it ties into this whole concept of the blood has a measure of consciousness, of divinity, of the gods within it, and the gods are the aliens, by the way, and we need to, I argue, they're going to go back to this idea that the Aztecs, who were sacrificing because they wanted the powers of the blood to go back to the sun and all this stuff, back to the sun gods, that we owe it to the gods to sacrifice, because this blood of ours, it's not really ours. We're borrowing it to experience this, simulation, this prison planet, and it needs to go back to God, which I'd argue they're going to make the aliens, which is much further down the line. Like we gotta take little baby steps to get to there, but much further down the line, it's going to be this idea that the material realm is the real evil, right? Because it's trapping the real divine essence of the blood, and that's the Gnostic that's the Gnostic outlook of our world, and it's the inversion concept that, well, really God the Father who created mankind, that's actually the bad guy. The good guy was the serpent. The serpent come along and was trying to free man from this prison planet, from this prison body that we exist, because everything's inverted, right? Everything's complete the opposite. So I got in trouble because I did a whole video on the Baphomet, right? The goat with the boobies, and that we see on the Church of Satan logo and all this stuff, because on TikTok it's gone viral that these kids are defending the idea of it. They're like, this isn't satanic. I mean, this is about balance and harmony and stuff. And while on some levels, like, yes, that's kind of what it symbolizes, but on the other, they don't understand that satanic doesn't necessarily mean that, we worship the devil with the horn and the pitchfork. No, they worship the idea of the inverted reality, that everything that's good is bad and everything that's bad is good. That's why Anton LaVey talks about this stuff, and he talks about embracing the carnal desires of man. It's everything gets inverted, basically. And yeah, the argument I lay out in the book is that we're attempting contact with these entities from another dimension. This follows a long line of occultists going back hundreds of years to people who were the pagans that were sacrificing people to these invisible gods of the air. And I'd argue that they are trying to reincorporate this into our world today.
Absolutely. And I love how the concept of alchemy and the great work, which is like historically pursues the idea of creating a new age, the new world order, which has been discussed. Man, you just nail it in the book. And with what you mentioned about materialism and how that is the new evil, could we use that as a segue into going into Santa Claus, into talking about Klaus?
Oh, yeah, the Santa Claus. Yeah, and that's kind of what he's presenting, right? He's kind of saying that, and boy, oh boy, how much do we want to get into on the Great Reset? The short version, if you look at the World Economic Forum's eight points to a better future, or whatever it's called, if you look at his books, he's saying that, well, we've got this confluence of things going on. If you look at his books, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, The Great Reset, the World Economic Forum 8 points, all these point to the same thing. It's this new age, and with technology and increased sensors through 5G, Internet of Things, increased data, because to these technocrats, it's like the more data, the better things will be. The more we can rely on technology, the better life will be for everyone. Which, again, technology is what's enabling you and I to talk right now and share these ideas. So, not entirely wrong. But the technology, he said in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, written, 4 years ago, he was saying, we're going to approach a point where the amount of data processing that we can do, we'll be able to fundamentally change the nature of what it means to be human, of what our reality looks like, and oh, by the way, it's going to happen at an exponential rate. It's going to happen much faster than the humans are ready for, because old Santa Claus there, he's really into globalist ideas, because he's a globalist, right? And like I explained on my shows about this, you got to understand that, this is from his perspective, and he looks at things from the higher level of abstraction, and I get where he's coming from, because I went to graduate school for systems engineering, and that was all about taking systems from a higher level of abstraction and managing, big picture, real big picture stuff. And that's what his worldview is, and he's just offering up his advice on what this should look like. Mm-hmm. Now, the ideas he's presenting are that through technology, fundamental shifts are going to happen. Then, 4 years later, we get the virus, and everything changes. Like I said before, right or wrong, true or not true, whatever you want to believe, the reality is they said, this is the thing. This is the thing to cause the Great Reset. This will enable us to pursue this new way of being, because now's the time to sort of rewrite the whole thing. Since it's sort of been all blown up, let's just start over right now. And part of that plan is to, he says, and these all sound like very altruistic ideas, like I'm the first one to get behind some of these ideas. He says stuff like, we're going to be focused less on materialism and more on contemplating, what do I really want in life? What makes me happy? And that's what this whole year of 2020 has been, is everyone's got more time on their hands than they wanted, nothing to do, and that either made or breaks some people. And for some people, this has been a very difficult year because they've used work or whatever, the exercising, the gym, whatever. They've used things to distract themselves from facing their real problems, which is a general idea that human beings that we do. I go to a therapist, right? Like very frequently, a couple times a month, mm-hmm. and I always joke. I'm like, man, I never want to come in here, man. Like I don't want to come in here. But then when I leave here, I feel better. And he's like, yeah, nobody wants to take their medicine. I get people like that all the time. Nobody wants to come in here. Mm-hmm. And that's just the human nature, right? And and Klaus Schwab and these globalists, they say, well, people have had a whole year. They're going to recontemplate their whole lives. They've been running around, focused on materialism and working hard to buy some other thing for whatever. And he thinks that this will change now. And we'd be kidding ourselves if we didn't sort of buy into some of those ideas that we've reassessed our lives, whether we know it or not. And I don't know that he's entirely right, but like the fact of the matter is we've at least contemplated some of these ideas, and he thinks that this is going to be the opportunity to create the new world, the global reset, where we're going to use all this data processing from 5G and the Internet of Things to monitor everyone's usage of energy. We're going to monitor wealth inequality. We're going to improve the life cycle of, and this is one that I get behind. This, he says in his book, he talks about we're going to improve the life cycle of household appliances, right? Because there's no reason you should buy a new washer every 5 years, a new TV every 5 years, and all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm on board with that, man. Like, bring it on. Like, I'll gladly pay 2 or 3 times as much for a product that I never need to replace. But like I said, I think it's more insidious. I think that the truther's got it right in the sense that he's going to pitch us this idea that through surveillance and data collection, we're going to make it an even playing field for everyone. No longer will the richest corporations on earth be taking all the money from the poor people. We're gonna make sure things get distributed properly for the benefit of Mother Earth, for the benefit of the poor people, social equality for everyone, so on and so forth. But the problem is the World Economic Forum is comprised of like the 1,000 biggest corporations, and it's like, no, dude, like you guys were the ones that started this problem. You're the ones that funneled all the wealth to the top and left everyone left holding the bag, trying to figure out how to make ends meet. But now they want us to look to them again for the solution.
Right.
And it's funny. It's like these globalists are not going to be. They're not going to be the ones not flying places. It's going to be us. It's going to be us that they say, well, you already used up all your carbon credits for one flight this year. You have to wait till next year to go on that other trip. And meanwhile, they're going to be private jet setting all around the world because they think that they have this higher place. This is a reinstallment of a sort of royal bloodline, the right to rule by the kings. Because, by the way, Prince Charles is in on this with old Santa Claus, too. He's in on this because they love this idea that, the royalty folks, the elitists, they're the smart people. They need to control us because all of us peasants on the bottom, we're just irresponsible and stupid. And like, on some levels, like, I get that. Like, as a mass, as a whole, like, people are pretty dumb. Like, I get it. But, like, I don't think that's the right answer is where I'm at with it. I'm like, I don't want you to tell me how to live, which is the sentiment from almost everyone. And I think, if people, even if they want to make bad decisions and make their lives harder than they need to be, like, I mean, that's the freedom, that's the free will that we get in America. And America's the big problem to these globalists because we're the embodiment of the freedoms and the liberties that we get. And that's why in the World Economic Forum 8 points, he says, I think it's like point number 3, he says the U.S. will no longer be a superpower and the U.S. dollar will be sort of crushed and we're going to replace it with a cryptocurrency and all this stuff. Because the cryptocurrency, as I argued 2 years ago, is a track and trace method. And back then when I wrote about it, it was the whole truth community was like, oh my God, cryptocurrency is the way to go. And I said, why? I mean, hard cash, dollar bills, like no one's tracking that, no one's tracing that. And maybe I am Nostradamus, Ryan. Maybe you're right, man.
Yeah, man.
But I said it a couple of years ago, and I said on the podcast, and I wrote a little book where I put that topic in there. I said, I think cryptos are the tool of the Illuminati here. And sure enough, Klaus says it, and sure enough, that's what we're looking down the barrel of, a cryptocurrency in America. Even they tried to push legislation to make that happen for the first round of stimulus checks, and I'll be damned if they're not going to push that through at some point here in the future.
Yeah, man, I agree 100% that the crypto, I was on board at first, and then you realize, no, they're tracking every little micro movement. And the bottom line is, this is, as many conspiracists believed, a way to just tackle the dollar. And yeah, you are kind of not Nostradamus because, man, you go into this stuff and you do kind of connect the dots, and it's not that hard to see how some of the dots connect. Last question I wanted to ask you was quick one, if we could, just diving into the Collins elite and Satan's army.
Oh yeah. This is a fascinating subject, and there's definitely a lot more for me to learn about this concept, this idea. But I did sort of give a primer for it, and that's kind of what I think the whole book is. It's a high level view because, you could make this a 3,000-page book. I mean, if you went deep dive on all these subjects. And to me, I kind of feel like not everyone's ready for that level. Because on some ways, I do want to be part of the truther movement of waking up the masses to some of these ideas, because some of these ideas are there's just so much you've got to know that most people don't have the time or energy for that level. But the Collins elite, you have to, oh boy, how do we start this? So you go back in time, right? Go back to the 40s, where you had these occultists like Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard. They were doing these rituals out in the desert to channel an entity through, right? The Scarlet Woman, the Whore of Babylon. Well, they were consulting with Aleister Crowley for his Amelantra working, which he was he pulled Lamb, the gray alien, through with this ritual, and they said, we're going to use that ritual out in the desert. In 47, they're doing the Babylon working ritual, and then boom, July, Roswell crash happens. And the argument presented is that, well, Jack Parsons, who was this sort of prolific scientist occultist, was opening up portals everywhere. And even Aleister Crowley, he didn't like Jack Parsons that much, even though Parsons was running agape lodges for his religion, Thelema, and all this stuff. But he kind of thought he was an idiot, and as per the letters going back and forth. And Jack Parsons he was opening up portals. Crowley was like, this idiot doesn't know what he's doing. He's not even shutting the portals down. And you've got the U.S. government who gets involved, obviously, with Roswell. And then they get Project Blue Book, where they start officially investigating UFOs right after Roswell, even though they told everyone, like, oh, no, it's just a weather balloon, everything's fine. So this all happens in the late 40s, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the Pentagon, or I'm going to say the Pentagon as an umbrella term. I don't know the specific unit, but we'll just call it the Pentagon. They had a group of U.S. intelligence sort of insiders grouped up. And by the way, this comes from, I don't want to claim ownership of this idea. Nick Redfern wrote about this in his book called Final Events about 10 years ago. But the Pentagon, they assembled this group to research what was Parsons doing out there in the desert, how was Crowley talking to aliens, all this UFO occult stuff, which makes sense to me. I agree with this concept because at the same time, they were doing, Project MK Ultra, looking at through Stanford Research Institute, SRI, they had like Project Stargate where they're remote viewing and channeling and the men who stare at goats. They had all these paranormal investigations happening. So to think that the Pentagon put together a group of folks to investigate the paranormal elements of Jack Parsons and Crowley, like that doesn't seem too far off the truth.
Yeah.
Well, this group, they were researching the feasibility of this. Like, is this possible? Is this real? Occult rituals to open up portals to bring demons into our world? Like, is that happening right now? And then the next thing you know, in 1952, Jack Parsons dies. He, as the story goes, he exploded and I don't know, building some kind of chemical thing, and it went awry, and he died unexpectedly. Some people say he was trying to infuse a spirit into a golem, which is curious because some people say that aliens are in fact just empty vessels that need our souls to exist or whatever. So there's elements of a spiritual battle, which I get into in the book with some theories and ideas.
Really good.
But the Collins elite, they were panicked, as the story goes, because they said, "Oh crap, we think there's some tangibility, some feasibility of these ideas that these occultist devil worshippers, because Jack Parsons called himself the Antichrist." The Collins elite said, "Oh man, these devil worshipping occultists, they're opening up portals, and now this guy died before he could close anything off. What are we going to do? This is a real problem." And back then, they had a very Christian footing because back then there was Christianity was more popular among the masses. Well, as the story goes, for over the last 50, 60 years, this Collins elite has been the influence and the sort of voice of reason in the Pentagon about how we shouldn't really be dabbling with these things because there's some truth to this idea that we might open up portals to Satan and the devil and demons messing around with this stuff. Mm-hmm. And they've always sort of been the voice of reason behind, because the Pentagon and Department of Defense, they would want any kind of weapon they could use, right, to protect America. They would want to know, can enemy countries unlock, bring demons through portals? Can we do that to, I don't know, maybe time slip over to another country unannounced? All these ideas. Could we weaponize this, basically? And the Collins elite is like, no, don't do that. This is bad. You got demons, and they're going to come through. Well, as per the actual interviews from like Luis Elizondo, the guy who is working with To the Stars Academy, he says, "Oh, I was working ATIP, this program where we were researching UFOs in the Pentagon. I was the program director for that." He said in interviews that, well, because people ask him all the time, why now? Is the Navy acknowledging these UFOs are real? Why is the Pentagon coming out and saying basically UFOs are real and we've got these materials and we don't know anything about it? And he said that, well, you see, what happened was we used to have these Christians in the Pentagon, and they've been ones they've been holding back progress because they think that they're going to let the devil in by messing with this stuff, and he implies that they've been sort of dying off almost. Their opinions have mattered less and less, something to that effect, and their influence has decreased over the years. And now we have decided we're gonna go all in on this thing, and that's the pervasive attitude among the masses right now, because we've been influenced by entertainment to think that the occult is something cool or revered or the actual proper truth to the nature of reality.
Yeah, man. What happened to like Jesus is just all right with me? That's all changed. But I want to get into, I first of all, thank you, because you're like the Oracle on Demand, my go-to Nostradamus, giving us serious genius on the occult, adrenochrome, death cults, the New Age agenda, and disclosure through Hollywood symbolism. It's just fantastic stuff, and I'm all signed up, and I'm ready to tear up. Where can our listeners sign up and learn more about Klaus and your series on the Great Reset and so much more?
Oh, definitely, yeah, thank you. So I've kind of got different avenues set up for based upon how much commitment the listener wants to get into. If they want to, dabble at first, you can go to IlluminatiWatcher.com. And you can sign up for my email newsletter, and I'll give you my first book for free. Just sign up for the email on the Start Here tab.
Killer book,
then,
too.
If they're ready to go a little deeper, they can go sign up at Patreon. Go to patreon.com/IlluminatiWatcher, where you'll get all the bonus episodes of the podcast. You'll get, again, 2 more free ebooks. You'll get Kubrick's Code, where we're talking about Stanley Kubrick movies. You'll get The Dark Path, which is sort of a comprehensive understanding. That's like my bestseller that explains the whole thing from start to finish. And, you'll get all the bonus shows there. And then I've also got a second podcast I do on Rockfin. They go to rockfin.com/creator/Isaac. You get all the Conspiracies podcast stuff, and then you get access to my second podcast I do called Inside the Mind of a Conspiracy Theorist, where we go kind of behind the scenes on what it is to run this sort of venture of podcasting or writing books and all that stuff.
So cool. It's great. It's such a great thing. And congratulations on your new book. I have a feeling that the second book will also be in the #1 spot, man. And I can't wait to talk again and talk more. Good luck through the holidays, and I hope the apocalypse treats you well.
Right on. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Good talking to you, and I'm sure I'll be talking to you next year when the other book comes out.
There it is, the amazing Isaac Weishaupt, Illuminati Watcher for those who want to sign up, and it's definitely worth it. He goes into just about everything. More than entertainment right there. Got more than your money's worth, didn't you? If you didn't think so, keep listening to the free versions. They will still rock the socks off a Cheeto-eating cheetah. But for the rest of you, sign up for $8 a month, the cost of a large cup of coffee. And you just do that at heroparanormal.com, and you can cancel at any time. You get a humdinger of a wheelbarrow full of conspiracy goodness, UFO, occult, crypto, and paranormal tastiness. Just do it. You won't regret it. Until next time, keep your eyes to the skies, feet on the ground, but don't forget to take a look around.
Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like it need Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like it need Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like it need Visine. Blast off, blast off.